Welcome. I am the loud little ducky. We are going to be talking about Commonwealth witness Shanon Burgess. He works for a company um, named Aperture. Uh, his location is sadly here in Texas in the DFW area. Um, I actually checked to see if he had ever been to my work and if I had ever seen him as a client. Thankfully, no, uh, and would never. Um, but he is t- he is going to be talking about the car data, the text stream data, the infotainment data from Karen Read's Lexus. And he is the one that comes up with this data to then give to the accident reconstructionist in this case that also works for Aperture named Judson Welcher. And if you've followed this case and have watched the trial, then you know that the defense ends up bringing out problems with Burgess, Shanon Burgess, a male with he's Shannon with one N, about his CV, his resume. And it's not always what it's cracked up to be. Um, and you can decide, and the jury will get to decide if that part is enough to destroy his credibility. There are other problems in parts of his, um, in some of the stuff that he has in his PowerPoints. But when we can't trust your resume, and if you're lying about your academics, or padding your resume, you have academic dishonesty. Are you lying to charge clients more? Is your company charging people for degrees that they say you have that you don't have? Are you being charged at that rate when you should be charged at a lesser rate? Um, and the company seems to know about it. Um, Seems like there's been lots of emails that have been given out. They've been contacted. That the company has updated its website. It has continued links um, attached to those things. This is a problem for this company now. And is it Burgess that lied and the company didn't know? Or is it the company padding his resume and submitting things? So, uh, this company is going to have a lot of problems. For anybody who's been paying attention to this case, people may not want to use them. People may not be able to trust them. And you can bet if anybody from Aperture or Burgess or somebody comes in into any case in the future and they're like, "Didn't you used to lie about your resume? Didn't your company lie about your resume? How can we trust you? You don't have the things that you say you have." But we're going to get into that we're going to get more into that in the details about it when we get into the cross examination. But first, we start with direct because he's an important witness for the Commonwealth. We know that Hank Brennan is doing it because Lally only covers witnesses that Hank deems not that important. Hank Brennan covers all the important ones. So, I have a hair on my ponytail holder, driving me nuts. Okay, so let's get into Burgess. And also, Hank makes sure that he does not go over Burgess's education background. He goes over certifications he has, like he is certified in Celebrite and Magnet, um, and that he is a phones expert and cars expert, so digital forensic analysis. He knows Axiom as well. He has 10 years in field work experience. Um, but he never talks about Burgess's schooling. And you have to wonder if that was done on purpose. Just ignore the bad facts is kind of how the Commonwealth has been running this case. Like, let's ignore Proctor. Let's not call Proctor. Let's not call Higgins. Let's not call the Alberts. Let's not call all these people where the defense is going to point out problems. Let's ignore them and act like they're not there. But you cannot wish them away, Brennan. They're there and you need to deal with them. And if you're not going to, the defense is going to. And that's not going to look very well for the jury. They're going to think you're hiding stuff on purpose and that you're not being truthful. Why is the defense always the one that's having to show us the truth? That's not how cases are supposed to go. The prosecution's job is to find the truth, not to win. So they go over that. They Hank Brennan does get ahead of the mistakenly thinking something was gigabytes versus gigabits. One is a capital GB, the other one is a capital G and a lowercase b. He said he accidentally wrote a small b, and so when he went back to read his notes, he didn't think that he had all the data. Um, so we knew about that one due to motions in limine prior to the trial that there was going to be issues with the gigabytes versus gigabits. We knew that was going to be a flub. But if that was his only flub, might not be a big deal. Um, they skips background on direct. He has testified in 4 states in the last 4 years, and he thinks that the defense's expert Matthew DeSogra report and PowerPoint are misleading. He says that the 1162 2, because there's 2 events that happen in the key cycle 1162. So he's saying the second event in key cycle 1162 was a backing maneuver. And he also adjusts the clocks. Um, to John O'Keefe's iPhone clock, which is plus 21 to 29 seconds. So John O'Keefe's iPhone is they needed to adjust the Lexus time 21 to 29 seconds to get it to John O'Keefe's phone. So they did that. Um, that was another thing that was brought up that we knew before Burgess got on the stand, that Burgess, in the middle of trial on May 8th, turned over this new report and some new opinions and shifted the timeline. And that he just did it all willy-nilly and nobody asked him to do it. This is after Ian Whiffen, the cell phone expert, and I believe Jessica Hyde as well, stating that there were steps taken and things happening on John O'Keefe's phone after the Commonwealth's time. So they said that he was hit, but then his phone was showing movements and they're saying, okay, this happened at this time. Well, now that those people testified, now he is like, well, we adjusted the time. So now actually all those things and the movements and everything happened before he was hit. And this timeline from trial 1 to now has been moved so much. It was 12:45, then it might have been 12:36, then it moved to 12:32, and it just keeps moving because the defense keeps saying, "Okay, well, that doesn't make sense. She couldn't have hit him at 12:45 in the first trial because Karen Read was back at John O'Keefe's house by 12:36 connected to the Wi-Fi." So they had to say, "Oh, well, she hit him at 12:32 or 12:33." But then you also have to take in consideration she has to leave 34 Fairview to get to John O'Keefe's house, and it has to fit into a time period. So, like, okay, no, it didn't happen at that time. It happened at this time now, based on 32, 31 and some seconds to 32. And they just keep changing the time. And it's, I get clock adjustment. I get it. But they're doing a range of time. So, ah, let me see here. Mm, mm, mm. All right, let me bring up. Okay, let me bring up this particular image to show you kind of what I mean by clock changing. Okay, so here we have the text stream 1162-1. This is the 3-point turn. This is not the backing maneuver, but they also applied this to the backing maneuver. So it says O'Keefe's iPhone clock is 21 to 29 seconds fast relative to the Lexus clock at the time of the 3-point turn. Lexus clock should be adjusted forward by 21 to 29 seconds to align with Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone clock. So for the 3-point turn, they're saying the Lexus clock said that it happened at 12:23:38 a.m. And then when you add 21 to 29 seconds to it, it makes the 3-point turn happening between 12:23:59 and 12:24:07. That's his thing on that one. So then he did the same thing in regards to the backing maneuver. And I don't know if I and I guess I did not. I guess I did not do the backing maneuver one because they are saying that mm, mm, mm. Well, let's get into but they adjusted the clock, the iPhone clock, giving the range of 12:32:04 to 12:32:12, with the end of the reversing at 12:32:43. Let me make sure. Mm. Okay. So then I'm going to show you kind of what he's talking about on the backing event. This is this is the 3-point turn, which last year I think Trooper Paul was saying this is part of when Karen hit him, but not this year. This year that's not the thing. So we are going to let's bring up this one. This is the start of the 3-point turn, and this is on Cedar Crest. This is heading change, end of 3-point turn, 12:24:07. 3-point turn Lexus text stream ends at 12:23:38. So these are all the different forms of making that 3-point turn. Going forward, then going back, and then going back down to turn down Fairview. And then it's the 507. Okay. I want to go through his parts of his PowerPoint because his PowerPoint is important. Okay, so we showed the clock adjustment. We showed the 3-point turn. So now I want to I'm gonna put these in order. Okay, we need okay, I don't need 19. Let's see what 20 is. That's the 3-point turn. That's still a 3-point turn. Okay. All right. So let's get to Burgess's PowerPoint. Because this is how he kind of walks us through the thing, and we will make some corrections to his PowerPoint because it is not accurate. So we are going to share screen and we are going to go to this one. All right. So as we can see, down here in the bottom, it says January 29th to January 30th. It actually should be January 28th at 6 p.m. to January 29th at 6 p.m. He has the dates wrong. So we have him lying on his CV, possibly misrepresenting things. We have the confusion with gigabytes versus gigabits. And now we have that he thinks that the accident and everything happened on January 29th going into the 30th, which is not true. It was the 28th going into the 29th. But if we just forget that he has those days wrong and focus on the times and we trust this data. But the thing is when because once again, if this was the only thing and it was like, okay, he's off by 24 hours, but everything else is correct, he just has that part wrong. Okay. But things start stacking. But we're going to pretend for this that he is possibly, this is what he is coming to the conclusion of, and that he actually means that this was happening January 28th into January 29th. So Karen Read's Lexus was traveling to 34 Fairview and the O'Keefe residence that they traveled to they left Waterfall Bar and Grill around 12:36. That is when the car powered on to drive over to 34 Fairview. And then and that was on no, that would have still been January 29th. So maybe yeah. But this should be because he's starting at 6 p.m. This should be January 28th, and then once you get to midnight, then it's January 29th. And if he would have not done 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. and just done midnight on the 29th to midnight on the 30th, he would have been fine. But he didn't do his timeline like that. But so we have midnight on the 29th at 12:36 a.m. to 12:42:08 a.m. This is the infotainment power event. That is the whole section in the green of the portion of the day when Karen Read and John left Waterfall, went to 34 Fairview, 30 Karen dropped John off or did whatever, and then she drove back to John O'Keefe's house and turned the car off. She turned her car off at 12:42:08. Now, also he could have put in here that Karen Read connected to the Wi-Fi at John O'Keefe's house, One Meadows, at 12:36. So even though the car didn't turn off until 12:42, she was still able to connect to the Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. All right. Then we are going to jump into his next slide. And his next slide is going to be slide 16. So this one is showing Karen Read's Lexus leaving and returning to John O'Keefe's residence. This is 5:07 a.m. and that is when Karen Read leaves. This is the video that he has that has the red looking thing in that picture is when Karen Read backs up and ends up hitting John O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse. And so That's how he's like, "Okay, the power on event shows at 5:07:46, and then we also have a video that starts at 5:07:58 AM of her backing out and leaving." So, they're saying, "Okay, that time is right." Then, we know that Karen from here drives and goes to Jen McCabe's house, and then they eventually come back to, um and then Carrie Roberts, Jennifer McCabe, and Karen Read bring Karen Reed's Lexus back to John O'Keefe's house to drop it off, and then they take Carrie Roberts' vehicle at 34 Fairview. So the second picture over here that has more of a white light up is them returning to drop Karen Reed's vehicle off. And so she turned off her car at 5:46:20 AM, and the video on the ring footage is a video that starts right around that time as well. And he shows in his little timeline that this is when that happened. All right. So we're stop sharing that. Let's go to the next one. And share screen. We're going to go to 17. And what would be interesting too, as these are all these different slides are different key cycles as well. That's how we know if the testing at 11:64 is when Massachusetts State Police had the car in custody. There are these key cycles counting backwards. And this right here, to me, this Dighton tow truck stuff, which there's two key cycles in this Dighton tow truck, her arriving and then her leaving, or it getting on the tow truck. But 1162, to me, counting backwards on events, and I've done videos on the key cycling and how I think they're off. I think the defense has tried to get into it with different people. The judge has not allowed it. I don't know why they cannot question these key cycles. But here he talks about the power on event of the Lexus. According to the infotainment center, it was powered on traveling from John O'Keefe's house to Karen Reed's parents in Dighton, and they did that at 12:35:01 PM, and then to um they arrived to Dighton at 2:12:01 PM. Apparently at 2:12:01 PM in this video, when you can see her pulling up to her parents when she arrives at her parents', you can see the windshield wipers stop moving and the vehicle suspension begins to lower, indicating power off. This suspension thing is very interesting because Burgess mentions suspension lowering, indicating power off. So when the the vehicle is on, the suspension of the vehicle is higher, and then when it's off, it's lowered. This will be important when we get to Welcher's testimony in his measuring and his accident reconstruction and considering the way things line up. But this is just to show you, okay, her vehicle powered on and then her vehicle powered off. And we have a video that correlates with when her video powered off. Um, there is actually, I don't know if there's video of them actually leaving John O'Keefe's house at One Meadows. I know there was a video of people cleaning off windows and stuff before they left John O'Keefe's, but so I don't know why he didn't include that one in the PowerPoint. So then we move along in his timeline, and we get to this is where we get to the tow truck. So this is to me key cycle 1163. Or no, this is key cycle 1162 because 1163 is when she gets to Canton PD and they take it off the tow truck and pull it into the Sally port. And then the next time they should bring it out is when they do the testing at key cycle 1164. That is just me. But, anyways, this is another point on the timeline that on January 29th at 4:11:46, the car is powered on. This is when it is going to go into MSP custody. You have the video of it pulling forward, then going back, and then pulling up onto the tow truck. And then you see it again go backwards off that tow truck after it gets loaded on to maybe straighten it out, and then it's going to go forward again. The motions that are in the trigger event for 1162 1 and 1162 2 all happen in this thing. 3-point turn, pulling forward, going backwards, and then pulling forward again. And then the reversing backwards. Once it's done that 3-point turn, it reverses back. This is why it's so important to understand these things, and I wish they would have hammered home on key cycles, and I don't know why they couldn't, why the judge wouldn't allow it. I don't know why, but I think this should have been clearly mapped out and explained. And then once it's on the tow truck, the car is powered off at 4:12:56 p.m. And he says the video doesn't capture the vehicle powering off, but once it's on the tow truck and the tow truck drives away, obviously we know that the vehicle is not running anymore until later when it gets back to Canton PD and their Sallyport. So he's just saying that the power on event matches a video that we can see the vehicle powering on and then things powering off. That see Lexus matches up with video things. Um, Still doesn't tell me when these trigger events happen. Mm, mm, mm. But the thing is we also know that while, yes, they did a 3-point turn and there was a backing maneuver for this, we do also know that when going to 34 Fairview, there was another 3-point turn because they missed Fairview and all that. And I think that's what's partially confusing is we know that there was a 3-point turn there, but we also know that there is a 3-point turn in it looks less like a 3-point turn, but if you watch the wheels in the Dighton video and it going on the tow truck, it's forward, back, forward, which is a 3-point turn. So there is 2 3-point turns. That's why the key cycles are important as opposed to, okay, we know there was this here, but that didn't mean there can't be another one that is associated with. And so and the thing is that the trigger events do not put a timestamp on when those happen. All it has is basically like a stopwatch that says this was so many minutes into this, or this is so many minutes from when the car was on. Um, which is odd too, because when we look at the stopwatch of the trigger events, and these are these are going to be Trooper Paul's things. And I want to bring it up because he does Okay, let me see. Is it no? Okay, I want to bring these up because I have to find them. Dang it. Videos. Sorry, guys. Taillight pieces. Okay. Yeah, this is the one I wanted to bring up. All right. So when we talk about these text stream indents, and I'm talking about a stopwatch, which we've gone over in some other videos about these key cycles and things. This exhibit right here, you see it's highlighted 1162 and 1162, that key cycle, and they are calling this first highlighted one 1162-1 and the second one 1162-2. Notice that the trigger is called the accelerator pedal opening angle is medium or higher immediately after shifting to reverse. And so what this means, according to let me go to my profile. Mm. So much going on in this case. Okay. No, I'm not promoting that. Okay. So I'm going to bring up, but I wanted to show you that. And then the elapsed time, it says it's 10 minutes and 57 um seconds into the drive, and then 18 minutes later, it's 19 minutes and 2 seconds into the drive, which is weird because we know that it doesn't take 10 or 20 minutes to get from the waterfall to 34 Fairview, even if you were driving slow. But we also know that the if she's doing a 3-point turn and then a backing maneuver on that tow truck, it's not 8 minutes apart. This is why understanding these key cycles and elapsed time would be so important. Um, because none of these actually make sense. They talked about that they went by the odometer miles and counted backwards from there. Welcher discusses that. And we will break that down when we get to Welcher and how he got to that. Because I did my own little math on that. But let's look at what this trigger thing actually means, because that is important. Okay, so it says that the accelerator pedal opening angle being medium or higher immediately after shifting to reverse in a vehicle is a normal and expected behavior in many modern vehicles. This is because when you shift to reverse, the vehicle is no longer moving forward and is preparing to move backwards or move in reverse direction. Therefore, the accelerator pedal might need to be in a medium or higher position to initiate and maintain the reverse motion. So, when you shift from drive to reverse, the vehicle's transmission engages in reverse gears, which prepares the engine to drive the vehicle backwards. The accelerator pedal and engine speed says the accelerator pedal controls the amount of fuel delivered to the engine and therefore the engine speed and torque. When you shift to reverse, the accelerator pedal might need to be in a medium or higher position to generate the necessary power to move the vehicle backwards. He says normal operation is it's not unusual for an accelerator pedal to be in a medium or higher position immediately after shifting to reverse, especially if you're planning to accelerate backwards. Vehicle specific behaviors. Some vehicles might have slightly different behaviors, but the general principle remains the same. The accelerator pedal will need to be in position that allows the engine to produce the torque needed to move the vehicle backwards. That is what this did. So when she did a normal drive to reverse, it needed to open things. It doesn't mean that she just got crazy. So I don't know. And if we mm, and if we go back, and I think even Trooper Paul last year, I know it's not a part of this trial, but when they were doing their testing, and I that Trooper Paul was like, "Oh, we couldn't even reproduce that exact trigger event," which the first thing they did, or no, 1164. They sat here and did this time and time and time and time and time again. And then this is a medium to higher. And then even in 1167 in testing, accelerator pedal opening angle signal is high during low speed. Then they have a position angle signal is high immediately after brake pedal is released. So these are just talking about the accelerator pedals opening and whether they are medium or higher, or if they're medium um, higher during a low speed. But this doesn't even talk about this is just talking about shifting forward positions and backwards. But this was just shifting into reverse. So I don't know if this is like normal driving. It's so bizarre. Um, but the thing is, what these trigger events do not tell you, and none of the car data that they looked at supposedly registered a collision. The trigger events, every time there's a trigger event, it does not mean that there's been a collision or a crash or anything like that. You can have trigger events for all sorts of things, such as sudden braking, something to do with the ABS system, um, TRC operation, um, PCS operation, many different things that can happen. These trigger events do not equal car crash. And nothing in the vehicle data, the infotainment center or the tech stream data said there was a collision. Although we do know there was at least one. And that is when Karen Read backed her Lexus into John O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse. It didn't do anything. There was no trigger event for that. So why is there a trigger event for they're trying to say, oh, there's a trigger event for her hitting John, but there wasn't a trigger event of her doing anything weird because at 5:07, you would think that there would be something there, but there's not. And it's because trigger events do not necessarily mean collision. Now, could you see if she suddenly slammed on her brakes or not? Maybe. Yeah, that can show up. But, nothing. But everybody has said that a pedestrian thing and a low impact speed, like little bump, um, that she did at 5:07 in the morning is not enough to have the car register collision, um, to impact anything and alert anything. Now I don't know if alarms and alerts, or cameras, the beeping system, if they are like, "Yeah, we sent out lots of alerts and bells and whistles during this time." But none of the stuff shows that there was a collision at no point. And something they're also using in the data for the three-point turn in determining that this was when it happened, or at least the three-point turn, before they went to 34 Fairview, is they're using John O'Keefe's phone. But it would be interesting to see what Karen Read's phone has shown. They have it. So I don't understand why we haven't seen anything about her location data and her vehicle speeds and things based off of her phones, and why nothing has been her Lexus clock and her phone haven't been synced up to look at different things. They've used it for John O'Keefe's, but they didn't look at it for any of this. And so this is the next part of the PowerPoint that I wanted to bring up, and it's the three-point turn according to the one that happened on John O'Keefe's iPhone location data. And it's showing that this particular three-point turn happened, according to his phone, at 12:23:59. And these are the longitude and latitudes, and then this orange one is there, I believe they're saying, is the backing event. No. Maybe this is the start of the three-point turn, and this is the end of the three-point turn is what they're saying. 12:23:59 to 12:24:07. Based on and these longitude and latitudes, if you plug them in, should end up on Cedar Crest. And that's what they're using to say, okay, this is where we're getting timestamps from for our three-point turn of the 11:62:2 key cycle. It's a lot of confusing crud. So that was basically kind of his direct in going over that stuff. Now, if we get into um, Shanon Burgess's cross, Robert Alessi does his cross. He asks if he's heard of cognitive bias. He asks if he has heard of confirmation bias and anchor bias. Cognitive bias is a systemic error in thinking that affects how people process information, perceived, and making decisions. It's a mental shortcut that the brain uses to quickly make sense of the overwhelming amount of information received. These can be considered rules of thumb or unconscious patterns. An example. Then we have confirmation bias, which is favoring information that confirms your beliefs while discounting contradictory evidence. Anchoring bias is over relying on the first piece of information encountered when making the decision. So if you're told this happened from a car accident, or this is when this happened, this is the key cycle that it happened, instead of figuring out if that is actually what happened or if that's actually the key cycle or actually the time, you are just doing testing to get rid of that. Um, you're testing everything and you're looking at everything and you're not just trying to prove your theory. It is what police are not supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to get tunnel vision. You're not supposed to be like, this is who we want to be the bad guy. So let's find evidence and make evidence to make that person the bad guy. No, you need to follow the evidence, not just one piece of evidence, all of it in totality to lead you to that. Don't just say, well, we're only going to pick the evidence that confirms this person is the bad guy. And that is something I have noticed with a lot of anti Karen Read people is they're like, okay, but this. So they're like, he didn't go in the house. He got hit by the car. She said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Okay, but his injuries don't say that. They um and if the evidence doesn't tell you that's what happens, you need to believe the evidence. You can't just look at Karen Read and say, I don't like her smug, smirky face. I think she killed a man. You can't do that. If the evidence is telling you that's not what happened, that's not what happened. You can't look at a gunshot wound and say that was by a knife. If the evidence does not tell you that that was a knife, it was a gun. Somebody could sit there and say, I killed this person. And then you get DNA back that rules out what that person said. That person confessed. But the DNA is not his DNA. So he could not have done it. It is impossible for this to be the guy because it is not his DNA. But he said it was. You cannot just believe because somebody said something. There's a lot of he said, she said in this case. People say Karen said this. Karen Read admits that she was questioning things. I don't think she even remembers when she was questioning things. Was it after she talked to Jen McCabe? Was it at the scene? Was it after everybody had left the scene? Was it later? We don't know. We weren't there. There's no audio recording of it. So it's a bunch of he said, she said. And we don't have any proof to back any of that up. So that's the things that we need to talk about when we're looking at things with bias, even in looking at the wounds on John O'Keefe. People are like, oh, well, if you look at one wound, well, we can't just look at one wound. We need to look at all of them together. We have to look at everything in totality. Just because one piece of evidence says somebody is guilty, and then there's 100 other things that say not guilty, You can't say, "Okay, well, because there's one thing, we can say she's guilty." No, unless that's just an overwhelming piece of evidence, but no, you have to look at everything together, and then so you cannot have these biases. So, unless he talks about these biases and asks if Burgess has anything, and then unless he gets into his education, and he says that in November of 2024, you said that you had a BGS, a Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration from Birmingham, Alabama, University of Alabama, and, um, pursuing and then he also put that as well on his April 2025 CV to the court for this case for Karen Read. And the that CV was given to the lawyers and the court. Then they get to the profile on Aperture's website, where there is a bio that lists his education. And on the website, it doesn't anymore, it's been corrected. But at the time, the website said BS, Mathematics and Business Administration. So a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of General Studies or whatever, but a BS in Mathematics and Business Administration. And it does not have anything that says it has no qualifiers on it. It doesn't say he's pursuing or that that degree is pending. It just says that he has on it. Then you can click on the link to his CV, and on the link for his CV, the website it goes to says that he has a BGS, a Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration, and that it was received in 2022. Then there's another link to his LinkedIn page. That page is now that link is disabled, although you could go to his LinkedIn and find it individually. If you went in, you'd have to go, but you couldn't get it to it from Aperture's website, basically. And he asked him, "Did you know or get a notification that the defense in the last 72 hours had accessed your LinkedIn page? And is that why that link is no longer working? Because it worked 72 hours ago, but now all of a sudden it doesn't," which they could have got a heads up on because over that weekend, right before Burgess testified, there was a lot of talk on Twitter about this guy's education. That it says he got a degree at this date and this date and this date and this date. Which is it? Is he lying? Did he have it? Like, what is the problem? Why is there so many different dates? That was brought up. And then somebody pulled his LinkedIn page up and compared it to his CVs. And so that was all done over that weekend right before he testified. And then all of a sudden, come Monday or Tuesday, when he comes to testify, now all of a sudden nobody can click on his LinkedIn page from the Aperture website. Then, so it's saying there. And then the so that's disabled. Then, but he says when he looks at the printout of that website and the CV, he says that there are multiple errors in it. One is the fact that it says that he got his bachelor's in 2022. The other error is that business administration the University of Alabama, Birmingham. It also does not even offer that degree at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And he says that it should say in general studies with a minor in math and business administration. Well, we know that they don't write degrees out as if a minor and a major. That is not how the degrees come out. It's a bachelor's. His would be a bachelor in general studies. It wouldn't say in this and this. Or it would say a bachelor's in mathematics or a bachelor's in science or a bachelor's in business administration or just business. It's not gonna say general studies and then minor in this and this. So, once you have, even on your CVs that you gave to the court for this trial, you put Bachelor of General Science in Mathematics and Business Administration when you're saying they don't offer that. So you still lied on the court's CV, and it should say General Studies, Bachelor of General Studies. So why, for the Karen Read case, does your BGS, Bachelor of General Science and Mathematics and Business Administration, why does it say that when your BGS is Bachelor of General Studies? Because you didn't just write BGS, you wrote out what BGS stood for. So they don't even offer the degree that you're saying that you have or you're pursuing. So he's saying, yeah, the one from the Aperture's website has the date that um of me getting, a bachelor's degree wrong, and it has the name of the bachelor's that I'm trying to get. Then, like I said, they talk about his LinkedIn. His LinkedIn, his personal LinkedIn, says that he had a Bachelor of Science or BS, Applied Mathematics and Scientific Computation, and that degree was that he was that Bachelor of Science degree that he was getting, it was from 2016 to 2018. So 2016 to 2018 is when he was supposed to be getting his bachelor's. He actually has an associate's though. So, and he said, "Well, when I made that, that was an expected graduation date, and it hasn't been updated in a while." So it's 9 years old from 2016, 7 years old from 2018. You didn't get a degree in 2022 either. There's another one that I think maybe says he had a degree in another thing. I think that's brought up at another point as well. Yeah, that he got a degree in 2024. He said that he was getting a degree in 2023, that he was supposed to have it in 2024. Come to find out, this part was not brought into trial. This is like 19 years or 17 years that he's been working on pursuing this bachelor's. And we find out, or Twitterverse finds out, that Burgess has not been enrolled in the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Remember, he lives in Texas, like DFW area. He has not been enrolled in classes since 2019. 6 years? He has not been enrolled in classes in 6 years. So you are not pursuing your degree right now. You're not even enrolled in classes, and you haven't been in 6 years at least. And if you are enrolled in classes, where? Because it's not University of, Birmingham. Wishing for your degree and hoping to finish it is one thing, but you are not actively pursuing it. It is not actively pending because you are not in the process of getting it. It is okay that you do not have a bachelor's degree. It is not okay to lie about a program or lie about having one. It is not okay to say that you are pursuing a degree when you are not enrolled in classes. I get life gets in the way, things happen. All of us, sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes we start our school when we're in our teens and 20s, and then we don't get to finish schooling until you're in your 40s because you raised children and needed to go to work. It happens. But none of us are saying for 20 years that we've been pursuing a degree, but we were just raising kids and life happens. We're not pursuing it at that point. We're not pursuing it until we're back enrolled in classes and actively participating in our degree, which you are not. As Emily D. Baker said, this is not a vision board. Alessi asks if Burgess knows the word mendacity. It's a very popular word on that day. Mendacity just means untruthful, lying. He asks him if he knows about academic dishonesty, honesty, or padding a resume. And you can say, "Oh," like, I've heard people talk about, "Oh, like, um, you he's just going after his credentials, he can't actually go after his work." Well, he talked about he got gigabits and gigabytes wrong. On one of his slides, he has talking about the events happening from the 29th to the 30th when it was the 28th through the 29th. And then if you wanna say that after a certain time, it does go into the 29th to 30th, okay, but at some points you're wrong. But he thinks that the event in John O'Keefe's accident happened on the tw he doesn't think that it happened the night of the 28th to the 29th. He thinks it happens the 29th to, like, 29th at midnight, not, you know, that it happened the 29th going into the 30th midnight and not the 28th going into the 29th. It's just and then we have resume lies. It's hard. Some of these things, if it was just one thing, it was a little minor thing, it could be like, okay, no big deal. But when it's thing after thing after thing, and if he was the only witness, okay. But it's every witness has thing after thing after thing. And every day in the trial, it is something every day. There is no day that does not have some kind of fuckery happening. I don't care from which side it's on, there's fuckery in this case every single day. He does get into the fact that, okay, you have an associate's degree. Um, you started pursuing your bachelor's technically in 2008, which, he got his associate's. So he got his associate's degree in 2015. So I guess from 2008 to 2015, he finally got his associate's. And then for 17 years since as well. And then from 2015 to now, so 10 years, he's been trying to get his bachelor's. He says that there are errors and misinterpretations, that they're not lies, they're not anything malicious. He doesn't say malicious. He just says they're just misinterpretations and errors, like Scribner errors. Sir, that is not a Scribner's error. It's not misinterpretations. It's misinformation, disinformation. It's lies, things that did not happen. Um, Alessi asked, "Do you work for insurance companies and law firms?" Then they go into the October 2024 proposal because he doesn't want to call it a report. He calls it a proposal. And that he said that you wanted extra data because of the gigabytes. He thought that 8 megabytes, he said it was 64 megabits. One was 8 megabytes, and then the other one was like 64 gigabits. Let me go back to my beast because I don't know these things. Okay. So, okay. G, capital B is byte. No, okay. That's what I was thinking. Big B for big. So he thought that it was actually 64 megabytes when it was supposed to be 8 megabits. Because he's like, oh, I just messed up one thing with the megabits and megabytes. And then he said it was incomplete because of megabits to megabytes, not just gigabits to gigabytes. It was, but he wasn't actually missing data and he didn't need extra data because the data from those chips, on those particular chips, he had everything. He said that, there was something about 540 megabits. It was actually 4 gigabytes. There's another one with like 50 megabytes. He says that he misunderstood. He says, no misinterpretation. He had just gotten it wrong. He made an error. And then there was like a 200 megabytes, what it was actually 2 gigabytes or 264 megabytes. A lot of megabits and megabytes and gigabytes and gigabits. And Alessi says, have you learned the difference in a byte and a bit? And he says he's always known the difference in a byte and a bit. Well, it doesn't seem like it. That or you just don't write things. Are you lazy? Are you incompetent? Which is it? Because it's important. And you can't be screwing up your lower cases and your uppercase B's. Um, and he got no additional info of value from the chips in the initial chip off thing. He has no clue about money that the Commonwealth has paid to Aperture. Um, and then he says he's not sure what a CARS report is. He does talk about January 29th, 2022. There was a crash report, but he had a CARS report from Trooper Paul. He never saw that one. There was a collision report that he has seen that was, which is report collision and reconstruction report by Trooper Paul from July 24th, 2024. He doesn't know anything about Trooper Paul, though. He just knows that there was a report. He reviewed Guarino's testimony from last year. He doesn't know Guarino's theory. He just skimmed through Guarino's testimony from the first trial for the infotainment and telematics part and reviewed the location data of John O'Keefe's phone. So he didn't watch all of Guarino's testimony. He just skimmed it when he was talking about that. But apparently Guarino had a theory last year based on data. I don't know if I even remember that. I remember cell phone stuff from Guarino, but not necessarily car data. He has no literature on Karen Read's Lexis model that the methodology used is correct in the way he aligned clocks and read data. That January 30th, 2025, he doesn't mention timing incident or text stream event. That the clock skew creating a timeline for Welcher for 1161 and 1162. He had just said, "Oh, it needs to be done by these seconds." He didn't actually go ahead and do the math to apply those seconds. Um, like what I was showing you on that 3-point turn, here was the data, and then if we adjusted 21 to 29 seconds, and then it gives you this range of time. And that 3-point turn could have happened, um, in that time. That trigger event happened within this time, according to him. That he didn't do that final math. He just said 21. He's like, "Here's the time, do the 21 to 29 seconds, and then you get that," but he didn't finish out the math to give you the answer of what the times would be when you add these. Um, then he amended his report on May 8th, knowing it was in the middle of trial. He said he was not asked to do it by Hank Brennan, even though that the email for the report says, "At your request." He says, "No, I copied and pasted that from my previous report." Once again, are you lazy? Why are you copying and pasting and not reviewing your work? He's like, "Well, do you normally review or do you do a lot of copy and pasting?" He's like, "I didn't think it was significant." It is significant when Brennan is not supposed to be talking to you. But we have a witness over here saying, "Per your request," on May 8th in the middle of trial. Um, he said that March 5th, 2025, he saw a defense expert report responding to Burgess report. Then he said someone misrepresented about clock sync. So he's talking about DeSogra, and that he wanted to make clarifications now, saying that 1162.1 and 1162.2 collision text stream incidents, and then uses the supplemental change. He uses supplement and change synonymously. Um, but he said he talked to Lou. But when he said that he made this, he says, "No, I called Brennan on May 7th. And I told him I was going to submit this supplemental report, or did you want me to?" And Brennan said, "Finish the report and give it to me." So Brennan did tell you to do this report. Another thing is experts usually do not do work all willy-nilly without being asked, because they are why are you doing work that you don't know if you're going to be paid for? Like, only do work that your people tell you to do. Because if he did that extra work, the Commonwealth could have been like, "Okay, well, you did that on your own. I'm not paying you for that. Like, you just wasted your own time." Um, I'm not doing that. We find out later with Welcher why maybe he just willy-nilly did some stuff. There was a budget to just do willy-nilly stuff, or you weren't billing by things. You were like, "Here's what we're paying you to do everything and anything that we want you to do." Um, but we'll get into that with Welcher. He talks about that he had talked to Tully to get location, um, and a full set before the report. He had a handful of conversations with Lieutenant Tully. He says about 5 to 10 times. Uh, Talks about the May 7th reaching out to Hank Brennan, sent the report on May 8th. The defense got it on May 11th. He did give a copy to Welcher. So Tully knew about it. Brennan knew about it. Welcher knew about it. All of this is happening in the middle of trial when he's not supposed to be talking to any of these people about this supplemental report, or this surprise report was coming. And he says, "Do you normally do supplemental reports or make amended reports or new reports in the middle of a trial?" And he says, "No, this is the first time in 10 years." Um, he talked about that he read, not wed, Ian Whiffin's report, um, and only looked at January the January 2025 report. He didn't know there was another report by Ian Whiffin for March 2025. So, I don't know why he didn't look at that. Maybe Commonwealth didn't give it to him. Then, um, they are there are clips that are played at some point. I don't know if it's at the end of the day, on this one, but there were clips played for Gretchen Voss interview because that was the end of the day, and then they come up on a new day. So from Gretchen Voss interview that was on June 20th, 2023, Karen Read is saying we missed a turn and did like a 3-point turn, and then went on to 34 Fairview. And then there was a clip from the ID docuseries, which was June 15th, 2024, um, that she talks about at 12:41. She left a voicemail to John O'Keefe, and that you could hear her pull into the garage and hear sensors beeping, um, and hear the car go off, walking with heels up to the kitchen. Um, I talked about that more in Guarino's testimony about that clip and what I thought about that clip, but I think that was played at the end of that day of her admitting to those times, the 3-point turn and then the 12:41 time, because Burgess and people had talked about that. Um, but anyways, back to Burgess. He talks about the accuracy and reliability are important. They get into the PowerPoint saying 29th through the 30th. He thinks that all events happened, um, that Karen Read being in Dighton at her parents' happened on the 30th, not the 29th. It didn't. So, yeah. Um, that's why it's like, you don't even have the dates right. But you are saying that you have everything down to the seconds and minutes correct in this case. And unless he's like, you think accuracy and reliability are important, right? And so then Alessi and them go over, the power on, the power off, um, and all of that stuff that we went over previously in the video. And then he was talking about he did a variance of a 3-point turn to see the pics, the line variances. He was talking about they don't apply. When he's talking about like call logs and things, that the only the calls after 5:30 PM variance is 18 to 16 seconds. Um, and then talks about ending steps. Unless he brings up the ending steps of 12:32:16 on John O'Keefe's phone, 26 seconds off of the text stream data. He talks about 12:32:09 to 12:31:43. The text stream says trigger event, and that is when Burgess thinks that Karen Read hit John O'Keefe. He asks him, "Do you know about the pocket state?" At 12:33:14. Burgess didn't analyzed the pocket states, so they didn't really get much into that. And then he talks about DeSoger, which is a defense expert witness, that he gives many phone and vehicle variances. He said, well, he only did the triggers. Um, and he thinks that the math, the clock math and the clock variance is right. Is just the adjusting the timestamps wasn't right. So he thinks DeSoger is just wrong, is disingenuous and misleading the jury and everybody. Um, he thinks 1162 happened before the phone locked. He says that the 3 reports don't calculate the time difference. The January report to March report, he changed methods. He did the math differently. Okay. Why can't you go back to using the other math? Is it because that doesn't line up with the Commonwealth's theory? If you use the first methodology as opposed to using the new methodology that you want to use now in the middle of trial after the Commonwealth's case doesn't fit and you need to make it fit? Is that what you're doing? Why are you changing your methodology? But he's like, That's not a change." Um, and that this is the only way that he could get the events to align the way that the Commonwealth wants them to. He says something about he can't correlate others from power on to power off. Um, that there is a -3 and there's a -3 for on and a -3 off. Because when you turn the vehicle on and then it flashes the logo, it takes 3 seconds, and when it flashes the logo, that's when the text stream data gets the notification that your car is being turned on. So, you need to go 3 seconds back to get the actual time that it was started. And the same thing with power off, it shows that, and then it powers down, so the 3 seconds needs to be accumulated for. So, 6 seconds in total need to be adjusted. The witness, Burgess, says he did that in the three-point turn and talked about it in his report. Um, I don't know why he didn't reverse the time. He the only calls can be compared are calls from the 5:21 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. Two events that were close in time to the collision were recorded by the Lexus and identified by Welcher and Sogra. Event 1 being 1162-1 is associated with the three-point turn on Cedar Crest, and then 1162-2 being a reverse maneuver on 34 Fairview. And he said gave a synchronization of time on those. But those are not related to his conclusions. Not related to conclusion. I don't know what that note meant. He said that the collision was based off the crash Massachusetts State Police report. The text stream events don't equal collisions. He did receive Karen Read's Lexus data. He only looked at what Welcher gave him. TextStream has 30 trigger events in 8 months. And he can't say that all of those trigger events are from collisions, obviously. But he says that there were only 2 trigger events on January 29th, which seems odd to me. Um, I would like to see all the trigger events, but we don't get those. We only get the one that they think she did it at, and they're testing ones. I don't know why we don't have a list of all 30 of the trigger events. If we do, I don't have it, and if you know where I can find it, let me know. Um, mm, he says the three-point turn is not a collision. Um, and that, triggers can be from slamming brakes and things like that. Nowhere in the black box data or the infotainment center s- reports that there was a collision. So that was cross. Now Hank Brennan gets back up on redirects. Um, and he's like, "Oh, you haven't updated your LinkedIn in 10 years. The CV that Aperture has is not done by him." Sir, where did Aperture get your CV information from? From you. They didn't just make up things. They got the stuff to put on there from you. And if they didn't, that's bizarre and that needs to be looked into as well. Um, he has certification in airbag data, um, that he wrote his report on the megabits, megabytes thing, October 10th, 2024, and then he made the correction 7 days later on the 17th. He realized his mistake. Nobody told him his error. Um, he found a micro SD chip, which that was important. I will give him that. It is good that he found this SD card because the during the chip off processes of those megabits and megabytes and things like that, those didn't really have any of the data that anybody that was useful to this case. Um, and so we can see more data due to him finding this SD card. I will give him that he found that, but he went looking for it only because he didn't think he had all the data. Um, he says that he did a more thorough analysis than DeSoger did. He did use Ian Whiffin's report to match the data. He talks about the 21 to 29-second difference in John O'Keefe and Lexus. Um, he didn't look at movement after the reverse. He focused on the time closest to the reverse because clocks are always updating, which we did find out that why didn't you use phone calls and why didn't you use other things to match these things? And he's like, clocks can be different at different times. They're updating because of satellites and things like that. And it seems like all the other experts kind of agree that it would be good to use something close in time if that's what you're going to say. And then Alessi gets back on recross, and because Brennan's like, "Well, you've never lied to this court, or you didn't submit that stuff to this court and stuff like that, even though it's on your LinkedIn page." And Alessi brings up a federal court filing um, that was put into court August 7th, 2023. It was a CV for a different case, and that he said that he had a bachelor's of science, um, general science or whatever, and it said 2004, but that one wasn't as big. He shouldn't have even had that on there because it also wasn't the correct degree. But he's saying, "Oh, I didn't submit that in the federal case. My company submitted it." Still not great. Makes us not trust your company. It makes us not trust you. Um, then there was a clip played after this as well from the ID docuseries from April 13th, 2024. John O'Keefe and her argued that morning. And she says that we think that he died around 12:25 to 12:30, which is because that's when they were told that he died. She didn't know that for a fact. She's going based off of what Commonwealth is telling her when he died. And they're doing that based off of his phone. And his phone, him not answering his calls, his phone's not ever unlocking again after that particular time. So that is Burgess. Uh, I would like never to have to deal with him again. And when you compare him to Dr. Wolf, there's no comparing. Dr. Wolf outranks Burgess every day. So it is Burgess v versus Wolf. And you can put in there a little bit of DeSogra. And then when we get to Welcher, it's going to be Welcher versus Rentschler. But company-wise, it's Aperture versus Arca. And I think Arca wins every day on professionalism and their testing and the way they've done things. But y'all let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. I'm just going to play a quick clip about lying. 3 seconds to send us out. But it says she, but we're going to say he. All right. I will see you guys later.
Not pregnant at that time, and she lied